Good afternoon, my good friends. Good afternoon. Welcome to my channel. Welcome to my channel. Good afternoon, my good friends. Let me introduce myself. My name is Andre Lefevre. It is Andre Lefevre. And I like to mouth off on things political, things cultural, things interesting. I have a wonderful treat for us today. Kasim, who was generous enough to donate to my GoFundMe account, was very generous and asked for me to make a video exploring what happened in February, where American forces annihilated a Russian mercenary group in Syria. And it is very, very, very interesting story. I even found an interview with one of the surviving mercenaries that I will play the audio for you. I dubbed it myself. I speak fluent Russian. Colorful language, very interesting. Before I get to the meat of things, I want to thank Kasim again. Thank you for your generous donation. Also want to thank Bobby. Bobby, thank you for the second donation. From the bottom of my heart and my wallet, thank you. Also, I want to thank Stephen, and I want to thank a gentleman who goes, who really, I'm not even going to mention him, he wants to keep his identity private. Also, Stephen, you asked me to make a video about the role of Jews in the progressive movement and in the globalist movement. And you know what? Give me a couple of weeks, I'll put one together. I don't know which direction you coming from, whether you're a Jew hater or a Jew lover or somewhere neutral. This is an interesting subject, and I'm going to approach it very, very seriously. Now, I just want to remind you guys that I have a website, wildnews.us. If you go to it, there is a Patreon button right on top, as you can see on your screen, and a GoFundMe fund, and I appreciate any and all donations. I'd like to upgrade my video and my computer equipment, as well give me ability to travel for the stories that I cover. And if you wish me to make a video on any particular subject, please ask. My phone number is on my website, and my email address is on my website, wildnews.us. Okay, going to the meat of things. What I'm going to play you right now, and just watch, give me just a second to pull it up. This is an aerial view, and I'm not sure what the source of this, but this is the most authentic that I could find on the internet, that the actual attack by the American forces on the Russian mercenaries of the Wagner Group. At the time when that happened, which happened in early February, there was an actual press conference done by U.S. military. And let me play you that, and then I'm going to make some comments and play more commentary. So this is the actual press conference.
Today, U.S. Air Force Lieutenant General Jeffrey Harigian joins us from the Combined Air Operations Center at Al Udeid Air Base, Qatar.
For a quick recap, on the evening of February 7th, the coalition acted in self-defense, where coalition advisors were present to support SDF from a hostile force launching an unprovoked, coordinated attack across the Euphrates River against an established SDF position. The hostile force initiated the attack by firing artillery and tank rounds at the SDF position, followed by a battalion-sized dismounted formation attempting to advance on partner forces under cover of supporting fires from artillery, tanks, and multiple launch rocket systems and mortars. At the start of this attack, coalition aircraft, including F-22s and MQ-9s, were overhead providing protective overwatch defensive counter-air, and ISR support, as we have done daily throughout the fight to defeat ISIS. We immediately contacted the Russian officials on the deconfliction telephone line to alert them to the unprovoked attack on a known SDF and coalition position. After these calls, coalition officials approved strikes to destroy hostile forces. On the ground, Air Force Joint Terminal Attack Controllers embedded with the SDF called in precision strikes for more than 3 hours from aircraft and ground artillery, directing F-15Es, MQ-9s, B-52s, AC-130s, and AH-64 Apaches to release multiple precision fire munitions and conduct strafing runs against the advancing aggressor force, stopping their advance and destroying multiple artillery pieces and tanks. As the hostile forces turned west and retreated, we ceased fire. Despite the attack being unprovoked, it was not entirely unexpected. The coalition observed a slow buildup of personnel and equipment the previous week, and we reminded Russian officials of the SDF and coalition presence via the telephone deconfliction line. This was well in advance of the enemy's forces' attack.
Okay, so that was the press conference. From what I gather and what wasn't said, it was actually a lot easier to explain this way. Let's face it, our government, U.S. government, has created ISIS, and it is supported by both Saudi Arabia and Israel. And apparently, we were helping those two groups hold on to a refinery inside Syria. Russian mercenaries were trying to liberate it, and a decision was made to annihilate them. So this is Steve Pachenik's, Dr. Steve Pachenik's view, and the way I see it, Steve Pachenik represents the wing of the deep state among the CIA and Department of Defense, which supports Donald Trump. So when you watch it, look at it this way. Fair use, I got it from Alex Jones's Infowar channel. So let it rip.
One thing. Trump, Mattis, and Dunford had done an amazing thing, and that was not brought up on your show or anybody's show. In February of 2018, we had 30 very experienced Delta Force and about 20 Rangers up the north part of Syria, working with the Kurds and the Arabs near ConocoPhillips gas terminal. And the Russians, the Wagner Group, which was considered a mercenary group, but really was part of the Russian GRU, military intelligence under Putin, came and started to attack our forces. They were 400.
All right, we got to take a break. All right, before we took that break, Dr. Pachenik was getting into what happened between U.S. and Russian forces in Syria. I'm just going to give it right back over to Dr. Pachenik to break that down. Start from the top where you were talking about General Dunford and General Mattis and the strategy employed by them.
Well, our strategy has been to avoid any conflict. And basically, we had allowed the Russians to come in and take over part of the problems that we would have had. But instead, we came in with special forces, Delta forces, to work with the Kurds on the northern border of Syria. And what we were doing was maintaining stability. The Russians were also there, but they were under the guise of what was called the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is really an outcrop of the GRU, Russian military intelligence, right under the direction of Putin. And they started to attack our 30 Rangers and 30 Delta guys who were just helping out. And they started to attack in the numbers of about 500 Russian soldiers with T-72s, 125 millimeter howitzers, and Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, got on the phone and tried to deconflict the area, and the Russians just didn't listen. So Dunford was ordered by Mattis, who I greatly admire. Both of these guys I greatly admire. And Mattis just said, annihilate them. And in 4 hours, our B-52s came in, our F-15s came in, our Warhogs came in, and just decimated all the Russian troops.
So,
now,
this is what Steve Pachenik said. And keep in mind, this is the version of the events that the generals and the CIA patriots in our government want to put out. Now, the next one is what I found is an interview, a statement by a surviving Russian mercenary. It is in Russian. I speak Russian, so I dubbed it. The language is colorful, a lot of profanities, so if you get insulted by that, give you a fair warning, so let it rip. What the news are showing, in Syria, 25 people are wounded in the Syrian army. It's all bullshit. Well, they just fucked us bad. In one regiment, 200 motherfuckers died. In the other one, 10 motherfuckers died, and the third one just got fucked up bad. I don't know the numbers. 3 regiments had casualties. First artillery covered us. Then they brought up 4 helicopters and fucked us with high caliber machine guns. And all we had were our regular automatic rifles. I'm not talking about PNGs or any other artillery. We had nothing. And American faggots knew that we were going. We were going to capture these manufacturing facilities, and that's where Americans were. Well, now our guys keep on calling me. They're sitting down, getting drunk. There's so many missing in action. And it's absolute motherfucking end. It's just one embarrassment. Oh, nobody cares for us, treating us like motherfucking assholes. And in our government, it's just backpedaling on this. I know that nobody's going to have any response. Nobody's going to avenge our death. Nobody's going to kill anybody for it. Just casualties, just lots of casualties. Okay, so that was the reaction of a Russian mercenary. Now, New York Times had an interesting article regarding this. And let me pull this up. Just give me 1 second here. Let me pull the... we are on New York Times. This was published on May 24, 2018. The headline is how a 24-hour battle between Russian mercenaries and U.S. commandos unfolded in Syria. And let me read some of it. Washington, the artillery barrage was so intense that the American commandos dived into foxholes for protection, emerging covered in flying dirt and debris to fire back at a column of tanks advancing under the heavy shelling. It was the opening salvo in a nearly 4-hour assault on February by around 500 pro-Syrian government forces, including Russian mercenaries, that were threatened to inflame already simmering tensions between Washington and Moscow. In the end, 200 to 300 of the attacking fighters were killed. The others retreated under merciless airstrikes from the United States, returning later to retrieve their battlefield dead. None of the Americans at the small outpost let me open this up. Let's see. None of the Americans at the small outpost in eastern Syria, about 400 by the end of the firefight, were harmed. The details of the February 7 firefight were gleaned from interviews and documents newly obtained by the New York Times. They provide the Pentagon first public on-the-ground accounting of one of the single bloodiest battles in the American military has faced in Syria since deploying to fight Islamic State. The firefight was described by the Pentagon as an act of self-defense against a unit of pro-Syrian government forces. In interviews, United States military officials said they had watched with dread hundreds of approaching rival troops, vehicles, and artillery pieces in the weeks leading up to the attack. Let's see if they have anything else. The documents describe the fighters as a pro-regime forces loyal to the President Bashar al-Assad of Syria. It included some Syrian government soldiers and militias, but American military and intelligence officials have said majority were private Russian paramilitary mercenaries and most likely a part of a Wagner group, a company often used by the Kremlin to carry out objectives that officials do not want to be connected with the Russian government. All right. The Wagner Group. We are on Wikipedia, and let's see what Wikipedia, basically what the globalists and the liberals want us to know about Wagner Group. The Wagner Group, Russian Grupa Wagnera, also known as PMC Wagner, CHVK Wagner, or CHVK Wagner. In Russian, ЧВК Wagnera. Again, in Russian, if you want to pronounce it, is Частная военная компания Wagner. Now, I want to say that it is interpreted by the liberals as if this was a right-wing it was a right-wing Nazi-type organization. Actually, it's part of the big lie. But let me read the rest of it, and we'll return to the big lie in a little bit. Some have described it as a private military or a private military contracting agency whose contractors have reportedly taken part in various conflicts, including operations in Syrian civil war on the side of the Syrian government as well from 2014 until 2015. In the war in Donbass in Ukraine, aiding the separatist forces of the declared Donetsk and Lugansk people republics, others of the opinion that CHVK Wagner is really a unit of the Russian Ministry of Defense in disguise, which is used by the Russian government in conflicts. Where deniabilities called for the Wagner Group also have been compared to Academy, the American security firm formerly known as Blackwater. That actually probably is true. Now, what's interesting is what, let me see if I saved it, what Washington Post wants to say about the Wagner Group. And remember, it is owned by Bezos, the globalist of globalists, who wants to turn our world into the brave new world, if you ever read that novel. So when I'm going to read this article, remember, Washington Post is a propaganda organ of the globalists who don't think much of the freedoms. Okay, this was published on February 23. The headline, what we know about the shadowy Russian mercenary firm behind an attack on U.S. troops in Syria. Let me pull over this. One of the most complicated episodes in Syria's ever-twisting war took place in the night of February 7. In that incident, U.S. troops and their Syrian allies near the town of Deir al-Zur were attacked by hundreds of fighters loyal to the Syrian regime. The Americans responded with a devastating counterattack that the United States said left about 100 dead. Soon the situation was complicated further by the reports that Russian mercenaries have taken part in the attack and were among the dead, making it the deadliest U.S.-Russia clash since Cold War. The mercenary firm is named Wagner, and it has linked to Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Russian oligarch who was recently indicted by the special counsel Robert Mueller III for an alleged role in the information warfare ahead of the 2016 U.S. presidential elections. think if you're a fair-minded, intelligent person, I think you can see certain interest and bias in there. Worse still, U.S. intelligence reports suggest that Prigozhin was in touch with both the Kremlin and Syrian officials shortly before and after the attack. The Washington Post reported Thursday the situation raises big question about the role of Russian mercenary firm, or rather pseudo-mercenary firm, according to Russian military expert Mark Galeotti, who was playing in the Syrian war. When was Wagner created? Wagner was first gained attention for its operation in 2014 Ukraine, where mercenaries with a group of mostly military veterans and ultranationalists were reported to be fighting alongside Russian-backed separatists in the eastern part of the country. The group was led by Dmitry Utkin, who until 2013 served in the Russian Foreign Ministry Intelligence Agency, the GRU. After leaving official military service, Utkin is reported to have worked with the private security firm Moran Security Group and the Slavonic Corps, a group of Russian mercenaries sent to Syria in 2013 with notoriously disastrous consequences. According to the Russian investigative outlet Fontanka, Wagner's founder is a Nazi sympathizer. Now, let me stop here and make a comment. This is what Dinesh D'Souza is calling the big lie. The Wagner mercenary group was created to aid the Russian-speaking separatists when Soros and U.S.-led coup toppled the duly elected president of Ukraine 4 years ago. Now, the new government that took place is unabashedly Nazi, and I'm not saying that just as an insult. They're true Nazi. Stepan Bandera, who was a Austrian-born Nazi officer during World War II, he was of Ukrainian descent, was in charge of Ukrainian Nazis who fought alongside of the SS. The new regime brought him as the philosophical and as the cultural icon. The major streets and major intersections are named after him. There are movies made in Ukraine making him a hero, showing him in a full Nazi regalia. The Ukrainian government is not shy about saying that Russians and Russian-speaking people are inferior because they are mixed with Tatars and Jews. What Lugansk and other regions, Donbass region in Ukraine, decided to separate themselves from Ukraine because they were forced into a subservient position because they were considered to be inferior because they spoke Russian and they were not Ukrainian. So the big lie is that somehow the separatists fighters are Nazis. Actually, the opposite is true. The Ukrainian government is Nazi, and they're not shy about saying that. That's what they are. That has nothing to do with the directly with what happened in Syria, but it's just to understand exactly what the Wagner Group was. So let me summarize it this way. Again, the ISIS and so-called good separatists in fighting in Syria were created by Obama regime simply to take over Syria, to create a lefty globalist type of government there. It was held by Saudi Arabia, and of course Israel is allied in there as well. Realistically speaking, we have stirred up a hornet's nest because Syria is at the cuff of a regional conflict that has been going on for more than a millennia. those are Shiite Muslims, which represented by Iran and Syria, and Sunni Muslim, which is Saudi Arabia and many other surrounding countries. As a result, Russia is allied with Syria and with Iran, and unfortunately we, United States, are backing the terrorists. So from what I understood, looking at different material, what has happened is that Syrians wanted to recapture their refinery, and our troops denied them that capability, and Syrians used Russian mercenaries to do it. More than likely, those Russian mercenaries were doing it with the blessing of President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. I have no doubts about that. But it doesn't make our hands clean either. The wars and politics everywhere, especially Middle East, are dirty. And what concerns me is, again, as Dinesh D'Souza said, a big lie. Russia is not a Nazi country. It's not a free country. It's not a beautiful country with American-type constitution where all freedoms are possible. But on the other hand, it's not a Nazi or a fascist regime. Vladimir Putin supports certain number of oligarchs, but he has no he has no ideology. It's a Christian country, and it's a conservative country, and that's why the globalists hate him. That's why the globalists hate him. I am not a fan of Vladimir Putin, even though I was born in the Soviet Union. I'm not a fan of Russia. I turned in my Russian card many years ago. I'm a patriotic American. Anyways, guys, I appreciate it. Again, visit my website, wildnews.us. Wildnews.us. I have many interesting things. It's a wonderful website. I have a conspiracy page on it. Check it out. And if you have some ideas, some information, some thoughts about what kind of videos I can make, please contact me. My phone number and my email address, or on the Contact Us tab. And I appreciate any and all donations. And Kazim, thank you again. Thank you again for for your donations and suggesting this video. God bless you guys. God bless you guys. And stay tuned. Stay tuned. I am going to make that video about the role of Jews in today's globalist movement and politics and finance. It's just going to take me a couple of weeks. It's a tough project. It's a tough project because I have my own biases, and just want to make sure I'm as fair to everybody, especially Jews, when I do it. God bless you. God bless you.